If you like our stories, please like, comment and subscribe for more. Flames roared through the academy, black smoke curling toward the sky as if the night itself had opened its mouth to swallow the world. Kai Thorne ran, his heart hammering against his ribs, his breath burning in his lungs. The fire wasn't what terrified him. It was the silence that followed. A moment ago, voices had screamed, spells had cracked through the air, and the Grand Academy stood untouchable, its stone towers gleaming under the glow of enchanted lanterns. Now the once mighty halls were little more than ruins, the banners of the Arcanum curling into ashes. Kai skidded to a halt in the centre of the courtyard, surrounded by the bodies of those who had served the Arcanum, their wands still clutched in their lifeless hands. A part of him wanted to feel something, remorse, horror, even satisfaction, but his mind was too numb, too full of something else. Magic. It pulsed beneath his skin, raw and uncontained, the air around him crackling like a storm about to break. He had never touched a wand in his life, never been allowed to train in the Grand Academy like the rest. He had been a servant, a nobody, the son of a family stripped of magic, discarded like trash. Yet now, the magic that had been locked away, controlled by the Arcanum, flowed through his veins like wildfire. He had done the impossible. He had cast spells with nothing but his hands. A sharp wind cut through the courtyard, sweeping away the thick smoke, revealing the twisted remains of the main tower. At the top of the crumbling steps, a figure emerged through the haze. High Chancellor Edrian Vale. His robes were torn, his once pristine face streaked with soot, but his eyes held the same authority they always had. The same belief that he was above those like Kai. Impossible, Vale muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Wandless magic is a myth. Kai lifted his trembling hands, his fingers stained with the remnants of golden energy that had erupted from him just minutes before. He should have run, should have fled while the academy burned. But something inside him refused to move, refused to back down from the man who had spent his life crushing those like him. Vale descended the stairs slowly, his wand raised, his grip steady despite the destruction around him. You don't understand what you've done, boy. Kai forced himself to stand taller, to meet the Chancellor's piercing gaze. I've done what you were afraid of, what your kind spent centuries trying to erase. He flexed his fingers, feeling the charge in the air. I proved the truth. That we don't need wands, that we never did. Vale's expression twisted into something between fury and fear. Then you've doomed us all. The words barely had time to register before the Chancellor struck. A streak of violet light shot toward Kai, faster than thought, and for a split second, panic gripped his chest. He had no training, no wand, no way to counter it, but instinct took over. The air around him rippled, magic bursting from his skin like a shockwave. The spell hit the invisible force surrounding him and shattered into harmless sparks. The ground beneath him cracked, the very foundation of the academy groaning under the weight of something unseen. Kai's breath came in sharp gasps. It wasn't just magic flowing through him. It was power, and it wasn't stopping. Vale's face paled as he took a step back. You have no idea what you're unleashing. The world tilted. The air became heavy, buzzing with a force neither of them could control. The academy's ruins trembled, the flames dimming as if something far more dangerous was awakening. And then Kai felt it, deep beneath the stone, beyond the shattered walls. Something ancient, something watching. The sky above them split open with a deafening crack, a surge of golden energy spiralling outward in all directions. The city beyond the academy walls, the towering buildings of the elite, the very heart of the Arcanum's rule, all of it trembled under the force of something greater than any spell. Kai's vision blurred as his body felt too small to contain the sheer magnitude of what he had unleashed. He had spent his life believing he was powerless, believing he was nothing. But now, standing amidst the ruins of the academy, the truth was undeniable. He wasn't just another lost soul in a world controlled by those who hoarded magic. He was the beginning of the end for them, and for the first time the Arcanum was afraid. The moment the sky split open, the city of Eldrin fell silent. Every sorcerer, noble and scholar under the Arcanum's rule turned their eyes toward the academy, where golden energy rippled across the horizon like the first crack in an unbreakable shield. Kai barely felt his legs beneath him as power surged through his body, filling every nerve, every cell, with something far greater than himself. The world around him wavered, the ground trembling, the flames of the burning academy flickering as if afraid of the force that had awoken. Then in a rush of cold air, the golden energy collapsed inward. The sky sealed itself. The trembling earth went still, and all at once the power inside him was gone. Not completely, but enough that he staggered forward, gasping. His hands still hummed with energy, but whatever force had answered him, it had retreated. Vale was still standing at the top of the ruined staircase, his grip tight on his wand, his knuckles white. But there was no arrogance left in his gaze. Only calculation. Kai knew that look. It was the look of a man realizing he was losing control. From the shadows of the Academy ruins, armoured figures emerged. The Arcanum's enforcers. Cloaked in obsidian black, their helmets were smooth and featureless, their wands bound to their wrists with silver chains. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They attacked. Kai barely had time to move before spells shot toward him from all directions. The air crackled with energy, streaks of red, blue and violet cutting through the smoke-filled night. He threw up his hands, but nothing happened. No invisible barrier, no surge of golden power. He was still drained. A bolt of violet light struck the ground near his feet, sending shards of stone into the air. Instinct took over, and he ran. His boots hit the broken cobblestone as he darted through the wreckage, weaving between fallen columns and smouldering banners. The enforcers followed, relentless, their footsteps silent, their magic sharp and precise. Another spell nearly took his head off, searing past his ear and striking a collapsed tower. The impact sent debris cascading downward, and Kai barely managed to roll out of the way before stone and wood crashed where he had stood. Think, Kai, think. There was no escape through the courtyard. The main gates had been sealed after the initial attack. The only way out was through the East Wing ruins, down into the lower tunnels that led beneath the city. But he had never been down there. No one had. The tunnels were a graveyard of forgotten spells and abandoned experiments, a place where the Arcanum dumped things they wanted erased. Still, it was better than staying here. He pushed forward, sprinting toward the broken archway that led to the East Wing. A spell struck the ground just behind him, heat licking at his heels. He didn't stop, didn't look back. Then, just as he reached the entrance, a hand grabbed his arm. He twisted, ready to fight, but the figure holding him wasn't an enforcer. It was a girl. She had short silver hair, dark eyes, and a blade strapped to her belt instead of a wand. Her expression was sharp, her grip even stronger. "If you want to live," she said, her voice low and urgent, "stop running and follow me." Kai didn't have time to argue. She pulled him through the archway, leading him into the darkened ruins of the East Wing. Spells continued to explode behind them, but she moved fast, navigating the rubble with ease. Kai struggled to keep up, his breath coming in sharp gasps. They reached an old iron gate, its hinges rusted with age. The girl grabbed the handle and yanked it open with surprising strength. Beyond it, a staircase spiraled down into the earth, the air thick with dust and something else, something ancient. She turned to him. "Go!" He hesitated only for a second before stepping through. The girl followed, slamming the gate shut just as the enforcers reached the archway. She pressed her hand to the metal, murmuring something under her breath. A faint ripple of energy spread across the gate, sealing it with magic. It wouldn't hold them forever. Kai exhaled, trying to steady himself as he looked at his unexpected rescuer. "Who the hell are you?" She studied him, her dark eyes unreadable. Then she spoke the last name he ever expected to hear, Varos. His stomach dropped. The Varos family had been one of the oldest magical bloodlines, second only to the Arcanum itself. But they had been wiped out nearly a decade ago, accused of treason, their entire lineage erased. Selena Varos should not exist. And yet she was standing right in front of him. He swallowed. "That's impossible," Selene smirked. "Says the boy who just cracked open the sky." The sounds of spells striking the gate echoed behind them. There was no time for more questions. Selena turned and descended into the tunnels. And with nowhere else to go, Kai followed. The tunnels beneath the Academy were colder than Kai expected. The deeper they descended, the more the air thickened, heavy with dust and the scent of something long forgotten. The walls were carved stone, etched with faded runes, their glow long extinguished. This place was old. Older than the Academy itself. Selena moved fast, her footsteps light, her posture tense like she expected something or someone to come crawling from the darkness. Kai followed, his breathing still uneven, his body aching from the surge of power that had burned through him. The tunnels stretched ahead, branching off into narrow corridors. Kai couldn't tell where they led, and he wasn't sure Selene could either. The silence between them was thick, but his mind raced with 100 questions. "How are you alive?" he asked, his voice hushed. Selene didn't look back. "Same way you are. By being a problem the Arcanum couldn't control." Kai's jaw tightened. The Arcanum didn't just erase people. They erased entire legacies. Families like his. Families like hers. And yet here they were, still breathing. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone like a pulse. Kai slowed, his senses prickling. Do you hear that? Celine stopped beside him. The sound grew, deep and rhythmic, like something slumbering beneath them. That's not good, she muttered. A blast of heat struck the tunnel walls behind them. The gate hadn't held. The Arcanum's enforcers were coming. Celine grabbed Kai's wrist and pulled him forward. Move. They sprinted down the corridor, their shadows stretching against the dim torchlight. The hum beneath them deepened, the runes flickering faintly, as if responding to their presence. Kai's pulse pounded. Something wasn't right. The tunnel ahead suddenly opened into a massive underground chamber. Towering stone pillars stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadows, their surfaces carved with intricate patterns. At the centre of the room stood an altar, a slab of obsidian, its edges lined with symbols that thrummed with a faint golden light. Selina stopped so suddenly Kai nearly crashed into her. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. You're not the first one, you know. Kai frowned. What? The first person in history to use magic without a wand. She gestured toward the altar. The Arcanum has been hiding this for centuries. Others came before you. His heart slammed against his ribs. Then what happened to them? Celine's gaze darkened. They disappeared. The humming grew louder. Kai stepped closer to the altar. His chest ached with something he didn't understand, something pulling at him, urging him to touch it. The energy felt the same as the surge that had ripped through him at the academy. Celine grabbed his arm before he could move further. Don't! But it was too late. The runes flared to life. The air thickened, pressing down on them like invisible hands. The golden glow from the altar poured into Kai, his body seizing as magic rushed through him. Images burned behind his eyes, figures cloaked in shadow, hands raised toward a sky that split apart in golden fire. A voice echoed in his skull, deep and endless. You were never meant to exist. Kai gasped as the world snapped back into place. He stumbled backward, his legs nearly giving out beneath him. The golden glow faded, but something inside him had changed. Selina caught his arm. What the hell just happened? He opened his mouth, but before he could answer, the enforcers arrived. A blast of violet energy struck the altar, shattering part of the stone. Selina shoved Kai behind one of the pillars as spells exploded through the chamber. The enforcers moved like shadows, their magic sharp and lethal. Kai pressed his hands to the floor, his mind still spinning from whatever he had just seen, whatever had just spoken to him. His magic surged, but it felt different now. Sharper, more controlled. Selina unsheathed her blade, eyes locked on their attackers. Can you fight? Kai exhaled, feeling the energy coil in his fingertips. He raised his hand, and for the first time he controlled it. Magic lashed outward like a whip of golden fire, striking one of the enforcers and sending them crashing into a pillar. Another charged, wand raised, but Celine was faster. She darted forward, blade slicing through the air, forcing them back. The magic in Kai's veins burned, but he didn't let it consume him this time. He focused, directing it instead of letting it run wild. A shockwave of energy burst from his palms, disarming two enforcers instantly. The others hesitated. For the first time they were afraid of him. Selina wiped blood from her cheek, smirking. You're getting the hang of it. Kai barely had time to breathe before a final figure stepped into the chamber. Adrian Vale. Unlike the others, he wasn't in a rush. He moved with purpose, his gaze locked on Kai. The enforcers stepped back, silent, as if awaiting orders. Kai's muscles tensed, his instincts screaming at him to run, to fight, to do something. But Vale didn't attack. He smiled. You're standing on a grave, boy, he said, his voice calm. A grave of those who came before you. You think you're the first? His gaze flicked to the altar, to the faint glow still lingering on the stone. The truth is, every one of them thought they were special. Every one of them thought they could change the world. He took a step forward, the flickering light casting shadows across his face. Do you know what happened to them? Kai's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Vale's smile didn't falter. They burned. The words hung in the air like a sentence. Celine moved closer to Kai, her grip tightening on her blade. He's stalling. Kai forced himself to breathe, to push away the weight of Vale's words. Maybe he was right. Maybe others had come before. Maybe they had failed. But that didn't mean he would. The magic inside him surged, golden light flickering along his fingertips. Vale's smile faded. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Kai raised his hand. You should be afraid. Then the chamber erupted in fire. The explosion tore through the chamber, golden flames surging outward in a violent storm. The enforcers scrambled back, shielding themselves with hastily cast barriers, but the force of Kai's magic shattered their defences like brittle glass. The ground beneath them cracked. The altar trembled, and for a moment the entire underground cavern seemed to pulse with raw energy. Kai didn't think. He acted. He turned, grabbing Celine's wrist, and pulled her toward the nearest tunnel entrance as rubble rained down behind them. The heat from the flames licked at their heels, but he didn't stop, didn't dare look back. Vale's voice echoed through the chaos, sharp and commanding, but it was lost in the roar of magic splitting the air. Selina yanked free of his grip as they ran. What the hell was that? I don't know, Kai admitted, his pulse racing. He felt lighter, stronger, as if something had unlocked within him, something vast and endless. The moment his magic had erupted, it was like the cavern itself had answered, and that terrified him. Celine didn't press him further. They ducked into the dark tunnel, slipping into the shadows just as another spell lashed through the entrance behind them. Kai barely managed to throw up a barrier, a shimmering shield of golden light that absorbed the impact before flickering out. They ran deeper, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient dust. The tunnel twisted and narrowed, its walls lined with decayed torches and forgotten markings. Kai had no idea where it led, but he knew one thing. They couldn't stop. Behind them, the enforcers were regaining ground. He could hear them moving, hear Vale's voice, low and patient, weaving spells through the stone. Then the tunnel split, 2 paths leading in opposite directions. Selina hesitated for half a second, then grabbed Kai's arm and shoved him toward the right passage. Go. His stomach twisted. What? I'll hold them off. No, Kai snapped, stepping toward her, but she was already moving. She turned, blade drawn, and sprinted toward the left passage, disappearing into the shadows. Kai's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to go after her, but he knew the truth. If they both stayed, neither of them would make it out. Cursing under his breath, he forced himself to run. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder. The hum of magic vibrated through the walls, growing stronger with every step. His vision blurred, his body still burning with residual energy. Then the tunnel opened into another cavern, and Kai skidded to a stop. The space was massive, stretching beyond what his eyes could see, but it wasn't the size that made his breath catch. It was the structures. Towers of blackened stone, cracked and crumbling, reaching toward the cavern ceiling like jagged teeth. Bridges, broken and twisted, hanging above a chasm of liquid light that shimmered with unnatural energy. And in the centre of it all, surrounded by ancient symbols and runes carved into the rock, lay something that made his blood run cold. A circle of golden fire. And inside it, a body. Kai stepped forward, his heart hammering. The body was old, long dead, dressed in robes that had once been regal, now torn and dust-covered. But it wasn't the decay that made his stomach twist. It was the position. The figure's hands were bound in front of them, not with rope, but with pure magic, glowing faintly even in death. Their mouth was slightly open, as if they had died mid-chant, and at their feet, carved into the stone, was a single word. Betrayed. A chill ran through Kai's bones. This wasn't a grave. This was a warning. He took another step, and the moment his foot touched the outer edge of the glowing circle, the body moved. A sharp, breathless gasp echoed through the cavern, and Kai froze. The figure's head snapped upward, empty eye sockets burning with golden fire. The magic in the air shifted. A voice, hollow and ancient, filled the space, not from the figure's mouth, but from the cavern walls themselves. You are not the first. Kai stumbled back, but the body didn't move again. Instead, the air thickened, golden wisps of energy rising from the chasm, twisting toward him like living things. The hum in the stone became a whisper, voices overlapping, hundreds, maybe thousands, speaking in unison. The weight of it crushed against his skull, memories not his own pressing into his mind. He saw flashes of figures standing where he was now, hands raised, magic pouring from them. He saw Vale's face, not as an old man, but younger, watching, waiting. And then pain, sharp and deep, splitting through his chest. Kai gasped, clutching his ribs, but there was no wound, no spell, only the weight of the past. He staggered, barely able to keep his balance. This wasn't just some forgotten cavern. This was where the others had died. And the magic in the air wasn't an echo. It was them. Trapped. Waiting. A heavy presence pressed against his mind, and a single phrase whispered through his thoughts, cold as ice. Break the chain. Kai clenched his teeth, fighting against the pull, against the weight of whatever this place was. But the voices were relentless. The golden light coiled around him, sinking into his skin, into his bones, pressing a single truth into his very soul. He wasn't just another lost sorcerer. He wasn't just another rebellion waiting to fail. He was the one who would end this. The cavern trembled. The golden flames rose, and somewhere above, Vale's voice finally reached him. "You've gone too far, boy!" A blast of energy slammed into Kai's chest, sending him sprawling backward. The moment his body hit the stone, the cavern erupted, golden fire surging, shadows twisting, the whispers turning into a roar. The past was waking up, and Kai was right in the middle of it. The golden fire surged, its heat pressing against Kai's skin like molten chains. His lungs burned, his vision blurred, and the voices, gods, the voices, they were everywhere. Layered whispers, screaming, pleading, commanding. Break the chain. The pressure crushed him, pressing him against the stone floor, as if the entire weight of history had decided to anchor itself to his bones. The ancient sorcerers, the ones who had come before him, the ones who had died here, they weren't just memories. They were still here, trapped. Vale's presence loomed above him, his steps slow, measured, his power cold and precise. He moved as if he had expected this, as if he had seen this happen before. You don't understand the magic you're playing with, boy. His voice was steady, but there was something else beneath it. Not anger, not even fear. Anticipation. Kai clenched his fists, his body trembling as he tried to push himself up. The magic inside him fought against the weight, but the golden fire wasn't just magic. It was something older, deeper. Vale's shadow fell over him. You think you're the first to try and break free? He gestured toward the glowing altar, toward the withered bodies of those who had stood where Kai stood now. They all thought they could change the world too. Kai gritted his teeth. Maybe they could have, if you hadn't killed them. Vale tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Killed them? He let out a small chuckle. Boy, you still don't see it, do you? Kai's pulse thundered in his ears. The voices around him grew louder. The golden fire curled higher, writhing in chaotic patterns, and deep beneath the cavern floor, something shifted. The chain isn't yours to break alone. Kai's breath hitched. That voice, it was different. Clearer. It wasn't just a whisper. It was a warning. Vale exhaled, almost disappointed. Every one of you has made the same mistake. Then, in one sharp movement, he raised his wand and stabbed it into the stone beneath them. The cavern screamed. The golden fire turned black. Kai's body seized as a shockwave tore through him, ripping something out of him. For a split second, he felt disconnected from his own magic. The force of it sent him sprawling, his head slamming against the stone. He gasped, his vision flashing white. The whispers stopped. And then, a deep, slow pulse. Not from the fire. Not from the altar. From below. Vale took a step back, his gaze fixed on the now blackened flames. The magic in the room had changed. Twisted, inverted, unnatural. Kai struggled to sit up, his limbs shaking, his mind reeling from the sudden emptiness. His magic, it was still there, but something had taken a piece of it. The cavern rumbled. The chasm of liquid light that had once shimmered with golden energy turned dark and violent, shadows slithering like living things. Celine's voice rang out from the tunnel behind them. Kai, move! He barely had time to react before Celine was there, gripping his arm and hauling him to his feet. Her breathing was ragged, her sword stained with something glowing and unnatural. What the hell did you do? She demanded, her eyes flicking between him and Vale. Vale smiled. I didn't do anything. The black flames lurched outward. A scream tore through the chamber, not from any of them, but from the walls themselves. The stone cracked, deep fractures splitting across the ancient carvings. The air shivered, a soundless force pressing into Kai's skull. And then it rose. A shape. No, a presence. Crawling out of the darkness, peeling itself from the chasm as if it had been waiting. A figure made of black fire and fractured gold, shifting, distorting, its form barely human. Celine swore under her breath. Kai's stomach twisted. The energy around them buckled, every rune in the chamber flaring to life, not in warning, but in recognition. This thing wasn't new. It had been here before. Vale's voice was eerily calm. There it is. Kai's chest ached. The magic inside him pulled toward the figure, recognizing something in it, something familiar. The whispers returned, but they weren't pleading anymore. They were laughing. Selena grabbed his wrist. Kai, we need to leave, now! The black fire moved, not like a person, not even like a creature. It shifted between forms, flickering between human and something much worse. And then it spoke. You are the last of them. Kai's blood ran cold. The figure tilted its head as if studying him. You will not escape the cycle. And then it lunged. Celine shoved Kai out of the way as the black fire collapsed toward them, consuming everything in its path. The ground split open, the altar shattered, and the cavern began to fall apart. Kai hit the stone hard, pain jolting through his ribs, but there was no time to recover. The figure's presence pressed into his skull, into his veins, forcing something into him. A memory. Not his own. He saw himself standing where Vale stood now, but it wasn't him. It was someone else. A boy just like him, magic blazing at his fingertips, golden fire swallowing the cavern. A boy who had failed. Kai gasped, his mind snapping back to the present just as Celine yanked him up. The cavern was collapsing around them, the black fire spreading faster than thought. Val was laughing. "You should have left it buried," he called over the chaos. Kai didn't look back. He ran. The cavern collapsed around them, stone shattering, fire twisting, and the blackened figure surging forward with the weight of an entire forgotten past behind it. Kai didn't dare look back. His legs burned as he ran, the air thick with magic that wasn't his own. Shadows slithered along the walls, reaching, grasping, and the golden fire, once warm, once familiar, had become something else entirely. Selina was ahead, her sword drawn, cutting through the shifting tendrils of darkness that tried to pull them back. The tunnel walls trembled, runes flashing like warnings, like desperate pleas to stop, to go back, to not let history repeat itself. But it was too late for that. Kai knew the truth now. He wasn't the first. He wasn't even the last. The shadowed figure behind him, it had been him before, not in flesh, not in body, but in purpose. Every time someone had risen against the Arcanum, every time someone had tried to break free of the magic that kept them chained, they had been buried here. Not just killed, turned into this. Celine's voice cut through his thoughts. "Keep moving!" Ahead, the tunnel narrowed into a steep incline, the air above them shifting, growing colder, open air. They were close. A deafening roar filled the cavern. Kai risked one glance over his shoulder and regretted it. The black fire wasn't just chasing them anymore. It was becoming something else. The broken stones of the cavern floor lifted into the air, twisting into a shape that almost looked human. The darkness curled into veins, merging with something harder, something more ancient than magic itself. A body. It was building itself a body. Kai's stomach twisted. Val had known. The Arcanum had known. That was why they had never let the truth come out. Because every rebellion, every fight for freedom had been swallowed by this place, absorbed into something worse. And now it wanted him. Selina grabbed his arm, dragging him forward. The light ahead grew brighter, streaks of moonlight slipping through a jagged opening in the tunnel wall. But before they could reach it, the entire cavern shifted. A force. Not magic, something deeper, older, something buried in the bones of this place. Gripped Kai's chest and yanked him backward. His feet left the ground. He barely had time to scream before the black fire slammed into him, wrapping around his limbs, his throat, his mind. The world turned silent. Everything stopped. No Selina, no tunnels, no Arcanum, only darkness. And then a voice. "You cannot break the chain." Kai's body seized, but the force holding him wasn't hurting him. It was searching, reading, and deep inside himself he felt it. The truth. He had never broken free. He had only ever been allowed to think he had. This had happened before. Over, and over, and over. The ones before him had fought. They had resisted. But in the end they had always become part of the chain. Fuel for the fire. Kai's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. He had spent his whole life fighting against a world that told him he was nothing. He had tried to prove them wrong, tried to rise above the Arcanum's rule, tried to become something more. And now he was being swallowed by the same history he had set out to destroy. His fingers twitched. The magic inside him. The golden power that had awoken when he shattered the sky. It was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't just his own. It was theirs. The ones before him. The ones who had fallen. The ones who had fought and lost. A surge of heat spread through his chest, not black, not gold, but something new. And suddenly Kai understood. He had never been meant to break the chain alone. But together they were stronger. He closed his eyes and let them in. The darkness recoiled. The black fire shuddered. The cavern exploded. Kai gasped as his body slammed against the ground, real ground, solid stone. The whispers were gone. The fire was gone. But the magic inside him had changed. It wasn't just golden anymore. It was all of them. Celine's voice reached him through the chaos. "Kai!" He opened his eyes, pushing himself up. The tunnel entrance was right there, open to the night sky. Vale was nowhere to be seen. The black fire was gone. But Kai could still feel it lurking, waiting, watching. Not defeated. Not yet. Celine hauled him to his feet. "We need to go now!" For once, Kai didn't argue. They ran. The moment they burst through the tunnel exit, the cold night air slammed into them. They were standing at the edge of a ruined cliffside, high above the city of Eldrin. Below, the Arcanum's towers still stood. But the sky above them wasn't the same. The golden light had returned. But this time it wasn't a crack in the sky. It was a mark, a scar. A warning! The world had changed. Kai exhaled, his hands still shaking, his veins still humming with magic. He wasn't the first. He wasn't the last. But for the first time in history, someone had survived. And this time the chain would break.